This will be quite informal, and the arrangement is just that they laid it out like a lecture. This is not a lecture. There are no quizzes, there's no test at the end or anything of that sort. It's just us. And we're just here to talk about some of what we do, how we do it, and hopefully connect with your interests and make some friends here and to continue with you what we do as our work when we're not here. Is there anybody else? Okay. Okay. That's good.
If you would like to, totally voluntary to just jot down your name, organization if applicable, and your email address. We're not going to sell your data. We just want to go ahead and provide you with direct links to our websites and newsletters and other publications.
Now, we're going to have our self-introductions here as part of what we're going to do at the start. Actually, before we do our self-introductions, one of the things that we really would like to know is who you are, why you're here. And I don't mean that in a big philosophical sense, but what? It's just for recording. Okay. If you want to come on up. The whole front row is empty. And again, this was not meant to be a lecture, but if you do want to move around. So what I want to do in the first several minutes here is really find out who you are, why you're here, so that we can begin to connect with your interests to make sure that we're actually meeting the things that you are hoping for us to present. So if we could maybe start at the front here and say who you are, where you're from, why you're here. We're talking about education and workforce, Naval STEM. That's what we're going to be talking about. So who you are, where you're from, why you're here.
My name is David. I came here from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. I came to this presentation specifically because I got the chance to talk to Cesar a little bit before coming here, and it's made it sound like it's going to be very interesting ways to bridge some of the governments that they help each other in making sure things work.
Very good. Thank you. Welcome. Let's just over the front, then we'll go back. Well, who you are, where you're from, why you're here.
Chad Wilson, from University of North Carolina, Charlotte. I was an Army vet for about 5.5 years, so spoken with me about what was being offered and what you guys were trying to accomplish. I definitely took an interest in that. So.
Very good. Thank you.
I'm Tyler Watson. I also go to UNC Charlotte, and I'm here to kind of learn more about the field and kind of build my network.
Very good. Thank you. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
Please.
I'm Brenda Abuzet. I'm here to learn more about cybersecurity, and that's why I'm here.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. Go back.
Kristen Feary, I'm the Navy, Navigator's Rapid Capability, and I'm the lead technologist of the department, and I'm heading up workforce development efforts, technical workforce development efforts for some of our mid-level engineers, more so than the school kids.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for being here, and we'll talk some more afterwards as well. Yeah, glad you're here.
I'm Rebecca Perry. I'm just coming off of a postdoc at the University of Virginia, and just starting a project on the evolution of computer graphics at NASA. And I study how technical people collaborate. So I'm interested in people in particularly entertainment industry, and I just came out of curiosity to hear another point of view on labor issues.
Very good. Thank you.
I'm Henry Kelly, University of Michigan. I'm interested in the breakdown between academic credentials and things that people actually want to hire in the workforce.
Very important. Thank you. Glad you're here.
I'm Nicholas Matherly. I'm also with UNC Charlotte, and I'm here just to learn.
Okay.
See what you guys have to say.
That's a noble thing. Thank you.
My name is John Spayward. I'm here because a couple reasons. One reason is big interest in STEM and STEM outreach, and also my wife is on the panel.
That's an important reason.
Dragooned in, as it were.
Thank you, John.
My name is Brandon Newcomer. I'm an architect. I think that STEM and education actually really plays into architecture a lot, and my fiance is also on the panel. So.
Very good. Thank you.
Dylan Thomas, IT manager at UNC Charlotte, also presenting on the dark web with my teammates and coworkers here. UNC Charlotte, I came here to, they say knowledge is power, so I'm here to get more power. And my sister's on the panel, Chrissy.
Thank you.
Stuart Reuter, retired nuclear submarine officer, director emeritus of the Navy League, and just curious.
That's a wonderful thing to be. Great. Thank you.
Fernando Millán, aeronautical engineer. I'm with Aviation Week, and I'm here to learn.
Great. Thank you. Glad you're here.
Jim Brinson. I'm actually a faculty member at the American Public University System. I teach biology and chemistry, biochemistry and genetics to be more specific. I have a vested interest in STEM. I've been in STEM education for about 20 years, and particular emphasis on military, teaching STEM to military learners. So that's why I'm here.
Very good. Thank you. Glad you're here. Please. Oh, okay.
I'm Bob Hershey. I'm a consultant in engineering and management, and I did a book to teach STEM to everybody, which is called All the Math You Need to Get Rich. It's my second book. The first one was called How to Think with Numbers. It has cartoons in it, and it shows people how to do interest calculations, how to use trade-offs, probability, things that we as engineers get, which everybody ought to get since it's just arithmetic. And that's what I've done, and it's gone through 5 printings, translated into Japanese and Chinese. Anybody who wants a copy, I got lots of copies of the flyer.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Now I know we missed some people.
I'm a technology consultant focused on the Department of Defense, and I'm interested in a smarter workforce.
Thank you. Glad you're here. I know we missed.
Hi, my name is Niyati. I'm a graduate student at UMUC for cybersecurity technology. My vision is that if I have a good job, I really want to do 100% volunteer hours for only elementary girls up to the grade 2nd to 4th, because those girls really needed to be molded to STEM. And I have been volunteering with many women GSU program in local DMV. So please count me in. My job goes towards those girls only.
Okay. Thank you. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
Did we miss anybody out there? Okay. Again, thank you so much for being here. I'm Michael Simpson, and I direct Education and Workforce Naval STEM, the Office of Naval Research. And what we're going to do at this point is, why don't we do some self-introductions of who we have here up here talking with you?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Kathleen Gately Miranda, the Deputy Director for Education, Workforce, and Naval STEM. I've been a Navy civilian for over 14 years. I've been doing program management for the Navy for that duration. So I started doing acquisition of technology, and now what I get to do is acquisition of talent for the Navy, which is really quite a fun job. And so we're going to share a little bit about that with you today, and hopefully field some questions and have a conversation around what that means and what it looks like for the Navy specifically.
Hi, my name is Ericka Rojas, and I am the communications point of contact for Naval STEM team. I have recently joined the team in the past several months, and it's been quite fascinating, and I'm super thankful to be where I am for this initiative. It's quite important, as we'll talk about. A little bit about my background. I began my career with the Senate Appropriations Committee. And so I got to see a lot of the behind the doors action of where taxpayer monies goes. And part of, I was the chairman in a way, his right hand, and so he was also the Defense Subcommittee chairman. And so that was my first take with Department of Defense. And I recently obtained my master's in public policy at George Mason University, and it was there that I realized I wanted to enter into the STEM field. I thought it was too late to get into an actual STEM job, and so I thought, why not help future generations of men and women to enter into STEM fields?
Thank you. I'll just jump over here.
All right. Hi, my name is Cesar Padilla. I'm here as a grad student with Penn State. I'm a PhD candidate in workforce education and development. But I'm also a naval officer. I'm a commander working here in the DC area at OPNAV N13, the Office of the Chief of Naval Personnel. Professionally, I've been a human resources officer for about 22 years. And so my interest is really in and around STEM and how we can take a non-traditional approach to developing STEM careers, especially for underserved populations.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Grassman, and I am the financial analyst for the STEM team. I have been in financial for the last 6 years. I started at NAVC, and now I'm at ONR with the STEM team, and now I get to fund universities and people who want to learn about STEM. So, yeah.
So again, thank you to the team here. Thank you for being here. My doctorate is in a mixed bag of environmental sciences and engineering, mostly nuclear. That was out of UCLA. I came to Washington as a AAAS Congressional Science Fellow. And for those of you who are interested in learning more about being a AAAS Science Fellow, I'd be happy to talk with you offline about that. It is a fascinating way to try to bring your scientific skills to bear in the policy setting to hopefully make the policies better informed. So that's what brought me to Washington, and I've been here since. So I've been in the public sector as a science advisor to Congress in the Congressional Research Service. I also went to the private sector. I was their science fellow and STEM program person over at Computer Sciences Corporation, it was CSC. And then from there, I went to a small consulting firm and worked with that side of the private sector. And now I'm back in the public sector because the opportunity to do the kinds of things that I'm doing here in directing the Education and Workforce Program, Naval STEM, is really what I'm fascinated in doing and pursuing. And so whenever I have the opportunity to pursue this as a work situation, I love it. And also just as a personal thing, I really am involved in and really like to be doing it. And as much as I can bring other people in as well, all the better. So right now, one of the reasons why we're here is to talk with you about the fact that, yes, Department of Navy, most of our comments are going to be DON, Department of Navy centric. These also apply in general to DOD, to the federal government, and then of course to society, but we are going to be mostly Navy centric. So what we do in the Education and Workforce Naval STEM office is we are always trying to inspire, acquire, and constantly develop workers with needed STEM skills to develop and deliver the innovative solutions to naval challenges. And these naval challenges literally go from the deepest ocean into space, whether it's trying to find missing aircraft or bombs or other vessels, finding those, to making sure that on the surface we are free to move commerce and people, to on land, making sure that people are free to do what they are supposed to be doing on land, to the air column, making sure the airspace is free for commerce as well as defense purposes, to deep space, to make sure that navigation and other communications technologies are safe and protected. All of those things are of interest to the Department of Navy. We have the Marines, we have SEALs, we have people on ships, we have people on land, we have some people in space sometimes. And we have people in the deepest ocean. So the naval challenges are definitely out there. They are everywhere. We need people to help us solve the naval challenges all the time, regardless of whether it's in the news or not. We are known globally, oftentimes because we also do first response, whether it's to a disease situation like Ebola or a natural disaster like in Puerto Rico or other places of the world. We have the ability to send floating ships, floating cities with medical personnel as well as equipment to be first responders around the world. We need the research, we need the capabilities, we need the training of the people on board those floating cities to deliver the right kinds of solutions to those areas, whether it be as first responders or as keepers of peace. So all of these things are so important to Navy that we definitely need people all the time. And we need to have people in the pipeline on the pathways to fulfilling the things that we need from them to protect us and to keep our allies and other friends safe. So that's what we do. And we do it by reaching out to students of all ages. We do tend to focus on people of workforce age, but we do recognize the need, especially in our naval STEM communities, to inspire kids to become infected, if you will, by the STEM bug, and then to develop them. So we don't just give them 5 minutes of inspiration and we tell them, okay, kid, now go off and be an engineer. No, we make sure that there's the education capacity to develop them into, again, people with the skills that we need, whether it be technician level to postdocs and everything else. Because, again, that is what Navy needs. We have people in shipyards doing technician work. They need to be able to get the ships up to the latest standards. They need to be able to know what is needed by Navy to make sure the ships are the best possible. So we have technician jobs. We have people doing fantastic research on the postdoc level to make sure that, again, we are ready for the next steps in everything from AI, artificial intelligence, to quantum and everything else. So we have a need for people from technician level all the way through fantastic postdoc researchers and beyond. We need to inspire the next generation of these workers at all of these levels. And in everything we do, we definitely recognize the fact that a degree is not necessarily the best measure or the best indicator of a person's capabilities or a person's chance of success. And so, absolutely, we are not looking just at people with degrees. And even among degrees, we aren't looking just for 4-year degrees, 2-year degrees, licenses, certifications. These are all important indicators of potential. But absolutely, we're looking for people's skills and capabilities and the kinds of things that we can inspire and then constantly develop to bring them into the workforce as quickly as we can to increase the efficiency with which the Navy's operating, and to develop them while they're on the job so that we, again, just don't bring them in and leave them to rust, but to make sure that they stay cutting edge, leading edge, and inspiring to the next generation. So one of the things that we've been doing is, in our program, what we do call Education and Workforce Naval STEM. We look at everything that can be inspiring through outreach, and then making sure that there's the education programs in place to develop the students of all ages to be the workers that we need. One of the things that Education and Workforce, my program, these people are definitely on the team, are doing is we are, in a sense, we're leading the way. We're showing that this approach works because we are delivering people that Navy needs. Interestingly, one of the things that's going on within the administration is they have said that they have started looking into the possible merger of the Departments of Labor and Education. Anybody here already hear about the administration's proposal to do that?
Heard of it.
Yeah. What can you tell us what?
Basically, just a squib in the newspaper.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, quite literally, that's what the administration is talking about, is combining departments of education and labor. And they're going to be calling it the Department of Education and Workforce, which is exactly the name of my program, which was not trademarked or registered as a mark or anything like that. So they can do that. But the Department of Education and Workforce, as they envision it, as we have come to understand it, is to make sure that Department of Education and Workforce, the federal government, is not looking just at people with degrees, 4-year degrees or 2-year degrees even, but to make sure that there is, in fact, the education and training and ability to solve problems that the United States needs. And that's exactly what we've been doing in Education and Workforce Naval STEM. It's again, exactly the same thing. So one of the things we've been looking at is something that typically was called Career and Technical Education, which is not your traditional 4-year degree. CTE, Career Technical Education, is really a variation on how to make sure that students out there get the education and training that they need to solve problems, even if they don't get a 4-year degree out of it. Navy has been doing that all along. Cesar will be talking specifically about CTE and how CTE is so much parallel to what the military has been doing in its education and training programs. So we'll hear from Cesar about that. But again, the general take-home message is, as much as you hear the efforts outside of here to bring education and workforce together, to have education and training for a purpose, is exactly what we've been doing. And so I'm very pleased and happy to have the team here to talk with you about what we've been doing and how we've been doing it. Let me just stop for a minute. Are there questions already, things that you might want to raise? Because again, this is supposed to be an informal sort of thing. It's not a lecture. Anything? Yes, please.
I have 2 questions. I forgot your name, but I wrote down your title. As a civilian, how did you enter into the department where Navy, Army, and military don't hire civilians? I mean, you started as acquisition talents, and now you are doing acquisitions of the. No, you started with acquisition of technology, and now we are doing acquisitions of talents.
Yeah.
So how did you propose, or maybe how did you convince your supervisor?
So I kind of just fell into it, which, you know, when you talk to folks about their careers, a lot of it is about being at the right place in the right time and being willing to, you know, take that jump and that leap. And so my technical skill is still the same. I'm a program manager, so I manage cost, schedule, and performance for whatever program the Navy tells me I need to work on. And so while I was doing acquisition of technology, although I think I was good at it, you know, it didn't really make my heart beat. Just like how you volunteer with the girls, that's what fulfills my passion. So what I did is I started volunteering with different organizations and no worries, and getting out there and finding out what can I do to help. And through all those connections and through my network, I found that there was a STEM team in San Diego that the Navy utilized to do this work, which is tied to the ONR effort. And so they had an opening and a position, and they asked me to apply, and that's how I came to be over the many years in this position. So a lot of it was just finding out what your passion is, following that, and then taking those steps to make it a reality. But yeah, civilian work, you know, is something that folks don't know as much about. You know, they know about soldiers or war fighters or the uniform, but they don't realize you can be a civilian scientist or engineer or HR representative or STEM talent developer.
Thank you.
Great question.
Very
Yeah.
inspiring.
Thanks.
Did you have a second question? No.
Actually, I volunteered as a veteran reserve corps, and we are the Maryland, DC, Virginia chapter combined. So I respect you by saying that you respect uniforms. I see a difference. When I wear uniform, I really feel contributed, like I was there yesterday, and I'm like something doing 100% volunteer. So something like that I'm interested, and I want to discuss with you about it.
We'll be here afterwards.
Thank you.
Let me throw in something else here, and it's not an official tagline, but it's an internal working tagline that we have on the team. And it's 6 words: see it, do it, be it. And the it is filled in by, you know, problem solver. It can be filled in by, you know, challenge, remediator, whatever you want to fill it. It's that idea. So if you can imagine back to when you were a very young student, if you saw a person who was doing something cool and inspiring, and let's say it was a STEM thing, and that inspired you, and so you saw it, and especially if it was somebody who you could relate to, because what you see is the kind of person that you are, you might not be able to identify more closely with it and begin to think, I can do that. And so you do it. You try it in a hands-on sort of experiential way. And you not only see it, especially as mentored by somebody who might look like you or sound like you or has your background or shares your culture, but you can actually get your hands on and be inspired firsthand. So you're actually doing it. But you're doing it, sure, on a young student level. But the thing that inspired the person that you saw is now hopefully continuing to inspire you as a student, so that you might become, the coder of the future, the quantum developer of the future, based upon the fact that you saw it, you've got your hands on it, you're doing it at that level, and then ultimately you're being it. You're being the person who's going to get that computer, that quantum system out there in reality, who's going to get that AI system out there in the workforce. So you saw it, you did it, and now you're actually being it and bringing in the next generation. So that's another thing that the team and Education Workforce Naval STEM is very much interested in doing, is to make sure that, when you reach out to girls, no matter what age, there are capabilities that we all have. And if we can bring those to focus on the problems that we're trying to solve, including having diverse solutions to problems, that's absolutely one of the things that we are striving for. Any other questions or comments at this point? Yes, please.
Well, this is maybe a little broader, but when you talk CTE, I'm thinking, what about the apprentice programs that this country used to have? And somehow we got off on a tangent that said everybody had to go to college. There's a lot of people who didn't go that route, but went into technical expertise things through one or more programs. I know in Europe the apprentice programs are much better than ours, but I've also had experience at the Naval Shipyard in Newport News, where you didn't become a manager unless you'd come up through their apprentice program. They took in post-high school kids, and you went into one of their trades and worked your way up. So the guy with the hard hat that said he was the boss had come through that pipeline and didn't come in from somewhere in the universe. And it was a much better workforce, as I could see when I was there helping build a submarine.
Well, one of the opportunities that exists right now is being able to leverage CTE even at the high school level. Now, all of these different CTE programs in different states are managed by by their own states, but they all receive funding, federal funding, from the Department of Education, the Perkins loan. And they have to meet certain standards. One of the opportunities that exists right now, having been a machinist myself and gone through A school and gone through that whole level of training, is that there are a lot of parallels between, say, something like a Navy A school and a CTE program. And as it pertains to STEM right now, there is one of the career clusters, or a couple of the career clusters, relate to STEM. And so one of the opportunities that exists right now is how do we leverage people who perhaps learn better hands-on and through a more project-oriented learning environment than the traditional academic approach. We certainly do it in the Navy, and we do it well. And unlike an academic environment, in the Navy, we got to live with what we do, with how we train and with some of those outcomes. So why can't we take something like CTE and bring it in? So we are thinking about those things because we do see an opportunity there. Certainly the workforce is changing, and certainly the economy is changing, and we kind of have to change with what's going on, because the more traditional approach isn't going to be a fit for everybody. And certainly it isn't meeting our needs, particularly in and around STEM. Hopefully that answers.
Thank you, Cesar. Let me add another point. I'll get to your question in a second. But while we're on this, there is a federal program, and it's Army and Navy. It's the Science Engineering Apprentice Program, CEAP. And CEAP is expressly targeted at high school students. And it's an opportunity for high school students who can go then, if they're selected, to go into a facility, Army or Navy, and again, firsthand experience whatever is going on in that lab. So they can start solving a real problem, working side by side with a current scientist or engineer in a naval or an Army facility, solving a real problem right now as a high school student. And it's one of the ways where, yeah, they're high school students, so they don't have degrees, they don't have licenses, but they're actually getting an education of a uniquely valuable way. And they're getting connected with the people who are solving problems right now in a uniquely valuable way. So absolutely, apprentice programs, that one is one in particular I can, remind people about.
The Navy League Sea Cadet program.
That's another one.
That's one of the things that does put kids into military facilities for training courses and training opportunities, mostly in the summer.
Right, absolutely. And so, yeah, in fact, we have been working with Navy League on the Sea Cadets and trying to integrate the efforts because the endpoints are essentially the same. And so how you get there, whether it's through Sea Cadets or whether it's through SEAP or some other thing, that's what we're trying to make confluent because they're all forceful approaches. But to have them flow in the same direction in synchrony is one of the things that the office does. Was there? Okay. Any other? I know there was up here. Yes.
Not so much questions, a follow-up comment. My preferred engineer is somebody who has hands-on skills, trade-type skills, and the ABET requirements for engineering is actually crowding out those skills. And I look, we have participate in various intern programs. We're trying to get an artisan apprentice program going, where because our machine shops are begging, and to be an artisan now is you've got to be very smart in a lot of things that we didn't used to think of that way. But one of the things I've been doing is I have a lot of technicians because we support all shipboard radar in the Navy and a lot of deployed communications. So I do get people who've left the Navy, had technician backgrounds, become my technicians, but I've started a program where I get them in engineering school part-time, and some of these folks are in their 40s, and so I'm kind of interested in that transition. I mean, we've had, I've got a lot of volunteers tutoring and things like that because it's very intimidating to go back to school. I went to graduate school after a long gap myself, so I understand that. But I feel this is kind of a neglected group in many of our programs, but they're dedicated, loyal, they're going to stay with my department. If I can just upgrade them, they can get in the flow for management and so forth. Because we have biases in our system. We have a lot of positions. If you don't have a 4-year degree, forget it. What is the Navy doing at other levels to promote this kind of transition?
Well, first off, thank you for the work you're doing because so much of what you're achieving is because you're involved. Had you not been there, if you had been a bad manager, the people that you are actually benefiting by your being there could be lost. And so I absolutely thank you for what you're doing. And that is so much of it, that there needs to be the right mentor there, the right person who can recognize that this person has these skills, and yes, they don't have the 4-year degree, or yes, they don't have whatever it said in the original resume, but that's okay. I've got the hiring authority. I'm going to hire this person and make sure that the proper environment, the proper education and training are there so they can really bloom. And that's some of the things it's beginning to change. And I can speak, Big Navy to a very tiny degree, but also across DoD in a tiny degree, that there's a growing understanding of this. And it's partly driven by the job market. Google, Uber, Amazon, they all need and can allure talent, oftentimes with dollars that we can't possibly approach. And we need to recognize that. And so we are out there trying to encourage students and get students aware of the opportunities and get them excited with a different value proposition. It isn't necessarily going to be the dollars, of course, But it's, again, the whole value proposition. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to get developed further in the hiring policies and the management processes within DON and then DOD. And there's also looking very seriously at what you can do once the people are actually doing the federal service, whether in uniform or not, to make sure that they stay leading edge. In academia, sabbaticals is a fairly common idea. Within the federal service, not so much. And so there's a term that's being kicked around, career intermission, where you keep your clearances, you keep everything going as a federal civil worker. And you don't lose time, you don't lose standing, you don't lose clearances, and yet you can do the education again, stay leading edge. And you can get back into whatever it was that got you inspired to re-inspire you, that kind of thing. So there's movement there. It's certainly not there yet, but there's talk about doing it. This has also demonstrated itself in certain communities where, through community colleges, Big Navy has gone, for example, into some community colleges and said, we need people with these skills. Can you school them up in these things? So it's happening, but again, it's slow, and you don't necessarily see that out there. Did you?
So, as Dr. Simpson said, thank you for the work that you're doing. It is so important, especially once we get folks into the workforce, to not forget about them. And so a lot of the work that we do, although we focus on future workforce, is also making sure that the current workforce is engaged. At the laboratory level, we're doing that in a lot of STEM outreach ways. But when you think about workforce development, it's programs like the ones that you want to set up that I think are helping our folks stay engaged and stay sharper. And so what some naval organizations are doing, which is not a new concept, but they have mid-career rotations. They allow folks to experience different places within their facility, within different departments, intergovernmental partnerships and agreements. I myself am actually on a detail, so I'm on loan from my home organization in San Diego here to DC. So getting that wider breadth of experience allows folks to understand I'm a part of a bigger plan, of a bigger strategy, and that allows us to engage the individual in the work that they have been doing for quite some time. Tuition assistance, those sorts of things. When you look at where folks are in their mid-career, the problem set is different. It's not a student coming out of college or out of high school. They might have a family, they might have had a baby. We need to look at removing those institutional barriers so they can be successful. And so if you're able to design that, you want to look at the local level and figure out what are the barriers I have and how do I get those folks to the next level. And it sounds like you have the capability to do that within NAVAIR, which is cool.
Yeah, well, we're funding the tuition with something called Section 219, which has traditionally paid for graduate programs, and I basically went in and said, why aren't we paying for undergrad programs? And it's been interesting. But we've got to, we've got to value these hands-on skills, and we've got to add to them what we need to round that person out, instead of letting them stay in a single, it's not a dead end in the sense they might not be enjoying a technician job, but career-wise, they're parked. But also in terms of the contribution they can make, they're parked. And the latter, I think, is more important. What contribution can this person bring?
Right. I did want to cover a couple of other things in our session here with you. One of the things was to have Cesar talk about CTE, especially in relation to the military. And then I also wanted to have you hear how we're doing our education workforce naval STEM activities right now from the people who are doing it in communities, in communications, and in lifeblood money. So here's Cesar.
Well, my interest in CTE began a while ago, mostly because I came across a professor who was dedicated to career technical education. And I attended an event up in Pennsylvania in Hershey called Skills USA, where they have these competitions. And I got to see firsthand what some of these students could do. So I had an opportunity to interview them. And one of the things that stood out to me was how how closely related the way they're trained, the way they work, the way they learn, very similar to A schools. So the idea came to me that, hey, you know, maybe this is just a different way of learning, it's a more hands-on approach that the Navy is already doing, and certainly the other services are doing as well. The benefit to that, at least on the Navy side, is that they see the results. And on the education side, not so much. You know, they're trained, they're educated, and then they're released, and then off they go and see how well they do in their own careers. But the opportunity to partner with the departments of education in various states at the federal level and develop a close relationship with the Department of Defense presents a unique opportunity for some kind of an economy of scale, where maybe perhaps we take some of those ideas in A school that we know are proven and be able to place them at the local school level and then groom people either for military service or wherever life takes them. At the same time, it's also an opportunity to take some of the knowledge and experience that veterans have and be able to place them in education careers where they get to practice what they've been developed to do all their lives. Certainly there's a high unemployment rate with prior enlisted folks, and this presents a unique opportunity for them to excel and continue their career path where they've been trained to do. So career and technical education, even though it is associated at the high school level, there's a component that's at the college level. And now it's evolved into a program where some students use that as a stepping stone to college. The approach, however, is not your traditional academic approach. It's really hands-on, project-based, and but unlike, say, an A school, the standards vary from state to state. So that's something that's right now that's evolving.
Great. Did you have questions that you might want to ask Cesar on CT military background? Okay. Now,
I just have a question. What is your highest demand from your side of the students going into like science, technology, engineering, math? What is the highest demand in that category?
Well, it's not. There's certainly the highest demand right now is in STEM. I mean, that's become such a hot topic that I think some out of the box ideas, kind of going towards your point that you made earlier, is bringing in people into military careers on a lateral move, like we do with dentists and attorneys and doctors, in engineering positions. And that's almost never done in the military. Usually you start at the very bottom and they do perform some kind of an assessment of where they think you're going to do well, and you develop and you follow a particular career path. There's opportunities to transition from one to another, but usually those transitions are pretty limited. So for military to step aside and say, hey, you know, can we bring in an IT person in as a colonel or a captain, Navy captain, that's very significant. It speaks to the need of needing more people in these career fields that, you know, people who would otherwise not even consider the possibility are really thinking about bringing in people from the street into military service at mid-career levels. So I would say STEM would be the highest.
let me add to that what Cesar said. And because what we are is Education Workforce Naval STEM globally, we have what we call naval STEM communities around the world. Each naval STEM community, be it SPAO in San Diego or SPAO or Atlantic in Charleston or wherever they happen to be, each STEM community has its own interests and demand signals. And we as the Naval STEM Coordination Office coordinate all of these signals. We support where we can, but we definitely coordinate. And so the particular needs of a particular place are going to be different. And sometimes the supply is going to be different also. Some communities might have a bolus of fifth graders. Another community might have a bolus of high school students. Those are the kinds of students that we need to inspire and then develop. And they can tell us, they do tell us, the kinds of things that they're doing, the kinds of programs they want to have in place to make sure that these students are developed and delivered ultimately as helpers to us. So the demand signal is in a lot of ways best defined locally. And that's what we do. So we'll go to these communities, and they are global, and we will develop locally as much as we can the kinds of skills that are needed right there. Cambodia has a very active STEM community right now, and they are very much moving in the direction of developing in the biomedical sciences, because that's what they've needed. After the Khmer Rouge got rid of so many of their educated people, there's a STEM thirst, and right now it tends to be focused on biomedical things. We have a STEM leader out there who was in fact a refugee with his family from the Khmer Rouge, came to the United States, got educated, joined the Navy. He's now there showing again the power of being able to do this in real life. And that is one of the things. So the young students now in Cambodia can look to him and see it. And then they can do it through some of the hands-on activities and ultimately be it. So we try to get the demand signal based as locally as possible. It does vary across the country, but pretty much there's capability to develop these skills no matter where they are. And that's what we try to do. Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. Other questions about CT? Yeah.
So I had a question. I know that there's a call for uniformity through all of DoD. You want your workers to be uniform in the way that they conduct business and hold themselves. Is that a struggle with the STEM program in terms of finding and holding employers, or employees for that matter, in terms of the talent that you're looking for? I know in the IT field in particular, you have a lot of free thinkers that don't really want to be thrown in a box and said, here's what you need to do. So what strides are being made to kind of accommodate that?
So just very generally, I think in my experience, what has happened is we've tried to bring in people in from the outside who are very talented, and we're competing with industry for these people. There's certainly a cultural difference in terms of, you have different subcultures, and they're not always a fit for military service. So there is that struggle, and it's something that even with this whole notion of bringing in people laterally, that is going to be a real challenge for people to adapt to. Certainly those who have made a career out of the military need to adapt to having people who think very differently from they do. But as well as people coming in, they have to adapt to the standards. So the standards will shift. Certainly at the end of the day, we still have our goals, we still have our needs, but we need to be able to adapt in some way. So it's been a challenge, and it continues to be a challenge.
Okay, I did want to have some time for the team to talk about the fact that we have been doing education and outreach to make sure that students are inspired and the workers are inspired and everybody continues to develop. And we do this in our communities. And one of the people here, Kathleen at the end, is going to talk with a focus, along with the others, on community work that we've been doing, communications, as well as, again, supplying the money.
Yeah, so we'll switch gears a little bit from CTE and talk about the structure of how the Navy does education workforce, naval STEM. So at our level, the cool thing that we get to do is we get to make sure that the sum is greater than all the individual parts. So Ericka brought some cool maps in the back that you can take a look at. You can see where all of our naval communities are across the globe. Obviously, we're the Navy, so it's going to be more aligned with the coast. So a lot of cities on the coast, but again, it is a global effort. And so those folks in those communities, again, are reaching out to the students that are there, the communities that are there, and aligning that to the demand signal of what they need in their organizations. So they're trying to make those connections to make sure that we can continue to replenish and revitalize the workforce that exists and that we want to exist in these communities across the world. And so what we get to do is be a part of that, support those communities, make sure they have the resources that they need, make sure that their story gets told to the right folks. And so that's what Chrissy and Ericka will be talking about here in just a few moments. The three communities that we work with primarily are grantees, nonprofits. If they've got good ideas, they can submit those proposals to ONR, and we'll take a look at those and figure out which ones we can support to try and make sure that we have the academic infrastructure, as well as students directly. So we fund students directly. Dr. Simpson mentioned the high school internship, the science and Science and Engineering Apprenticeship Program. We also have internships at the college level for undergrad and graduate. There are some postdoc programs and things like that. So we try and find who are those individuals that are already doing what we need them to do, and how can we support them through their academic career so when they come out, we can hire them and integrate them into our workforce, because we know they already have the skills that we need. They maybe already have the experience through internship and training. So we want to make sure that we don't lose them in that conversion from student to employee. The last thing that we do is we work with these naval STEM communities across the world. Again, we try and help them to figure out what is it they need and how do we help them reach out to those folks to make sure that students stay inspired and engaged and eventually, hopefully, become the next generation workforce. So that's the three main focus groups. I'm going to hand it over to Ericka, and she's going to talk about how we do some of our communications.
Thanks, Kathleen. For spreading the awareness and motivating those within the communities that we help to support, we have quarterly newsletters. Within that, our stakeholders, we have about 14 organizations throughout the world who are part of the Navy, and they will provide us stories, updates, things that they want for us to share across the community. And so you'll be able to find our most recent publications from this past year on the table, as well as our annual guide, which, as Kathleen mentioned, contains our map of where all of our stakeholders are held, the commands, syscoms, and so you'll be able to read some of their brief descriptions and what they do. And we also have a list of possible fellowships or internships, which is the one-pager handout also on the table, as well as our oversized business card, but it contains just a brief info about what we do, and it has our email address and it has a link to our website. If you email that email address, each one of us will receive that message and someone will respond to you as promptly as possible. And just also a little bit about what's in our publications and spreading the awareness is just as what we've mentioned and Dr. Simpson's reiterated multiple times, is just this idea of see it, do it, be it. We have examples of folks who have been not only mentors but also mentees, and also those who have served in both roles. We have several examples of people who work in our communities who have been mentees and then over the years have turned into mentors. And so it's just, it's this monopoly effect. And so we're very proud of what we're able to showcase. This is just a brief glimpse of what our communities are doing, but I think the message that I'm just trying to get across is that it's this pay forward idea that we're very much underlines everything that we do. And so as one person is positively affected, whether by an apprenticeship program, internship program, fellowship, even just going to a summer camp, at the U.S. Nearby here, the U.S. Naval Academy, they have summer camps, and those young boys and girls, who knows, they might be inspired not to just be in STEM, but also serve the very country that they live in. And so we're very proud. And if there are any questions, please ask. And please feel free to take a copy of the publications there. And if you haven't already, please sign up on the sign-up sheet. I jokingly mentioned that we don't sell the data that we collect. We just want to ensure that we're able to provide you the links that you guys can see our most up-to-date publications and what we do. So thank you for all being here.
And to make sure that the lifeblood is actually flowing to the people as well as the communities that they're in, we have Chrissy.
Hello, I'm Chrissy Grassman. We simply, we work with universities and labs, Navy labs in the area and all over the country. And thanks to Kathleen, she's been a huge help helping me with the budget. And we get to manage how we send out the money and if we have enough. And then once we
There's never enough.
There's never enough. Once we give them the okay and we communicate with them how much we're going to send them, I go into my databases, ERP and PPS, and I process away and I track your funding for you and I make sure that you're happy on your end. Yeah. That's pretty much it in a nutshell.
So, we have a question.
How much input do you have to something like the NROTC program?
We connect with the schools that have those programs, which, as you know, is not everywhere. And we try to, the first thing is we spread the awareness of the kinds of things that we do, education, workforce, naval STEM, and the things that we do that connect. Because they don't necessarily, on their own, in their communities, know all the other things going on across Navy, across DoD, and across federal government and beyond. So that's the first thing. We also work whenever we get, for example, plus-up money or other kinds of money from Congress. Sometimes it's targeted. Sometimes it says you will spend this money on ROTC, and in our case, NROTC. So when we get that kind of targeted specific money, then absolutely, we reach out to make sure that, number one, congressional intent is met, and then number two, that NROTC does benefit and it produces the kinds of things that the Congress intended. There is, in fact, right now a specific NROTC congressional ad that we're working on to make sure that those particular schools are going to be doing the things that the Congress intended. So yeah, very much they are part of our collection of, they aren't just customers, but they are in a lot of ways co-owners of what we do and who we are. So we relate with them that way. They're not just clients, but they actually are people who guide us as to what they can do, what they want to do, and how we might be able to help them do that. And we can certainly talk some more afterward if you want, but that's part of it. Other questions or comments in general?
Yeah, question about data. You guys have the advantage of hiring your own graduates, in fact. You must have an incredible opportunity here to find out whether what you're doing is working or not. And you have a lot of experiments going on. I know that there was a big DARPA project about training IT people for shipboard repairs, which I just thought was brilliant because they spent half their time just trying to figure out who were the best people, how did they get to be the best people, what do you mean by best, and then how do you change the curricula so that it actually tried to clone these people. Like a lot of DARPA projects, it seemed to have been a flash in the sky and disappeared, but it struck me that this was a giant opportunity that you guys have as all these new instructional technologies, new methodologies, and mentoring with people and artificial. It just seems to be a cloud of anecdotes rather than a systematic approach to figuring out what's working and what's not. And I guess the question is, how are you using this huge treasure trove of Navy data to try to feed them?
Do you want to talk about that?
I can give it a crack, although it's not going to. It's probably not going to be the answer you're looking for. But we're the Navy DoD is a huge organization, and so as money is divided up, it goes into different pipelines, and different pipelines have different goals. So. That's a little hard to answer, but at least on the policy side, which is where I tend to come from, we do look at some of the data. We have a team of statisticians that assess different programs, and we look at what our current goals are, and we compare it against what's going on. And sometimes even something that may be successful may not necessarily become a priority based on our current need. So maybe that's as close as I can get to. But
What metrics do you use? How the data is only as good as
Sure.
whatever the measurement was, right?
Yes, but again, depends on the shop, right? So in my shop, we look at things like diversity. So we want to look at, what is the mix of male to female in certain programs. We want to look at, are we, how well are we recruiting minorities? So it just depends. It depends on the office. My office is not going to look at other things like program effectiveness. Our input and our interest is really in and around diversity. So again, it depends on the office that's involved and the amount of weight that the overall leadership places on a particular program. So I can easily see how something that could be very, very successful may either at least be put aside for the moment, and the focus can shift to other goals, at least momentarily. So that's why it's a little hard to answer that question without actually going back. But one thing that you may want to look at are maybe some of the congressional reports that go up, and then you might be able to see what some of the priorities have been. And if that hasn't necessarily been a priority, it's probably not been developed further. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, if we're putting money into educating people,
Mm-hmm.
we want to know are they doing the job we need them to do? I certainly appreciate interest in diversity because it's something the Navy could stand to work on more.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, in the dark, in the rain, Sea State 7, people yelling, and the aircraft can't land because the radar's broken. I want the man or woman out there who can fix that under all that pressure.
Mm-hmm.
How do I figure out whether this investment over here is giving me that person over there?
Right. Thank you for the question. It is a very real one with very real answers, because the answer and the question have a time continuum to them. There's the immediate need, and then there's this longer-term policy direction. On the immediate need, the metric is actually fairly simple, and that is exactly, are we supplying people with the skills that are needed to help them fix that radar so that the craft can come in? I can give you an example where we were told by Cherry Point Naval Air Station that they needed aeronautical engineers right now. And so we went through a competitive process. We got a university to produce students with the aeronautical engineering skills to apply for those jobs at Cherry Point. No guarantee of a job, but skill them up. And they happen to be veterans. So there are a lot of things going for these students, and they are excellent. In fact, the hiring manager told me not too long ago that he's doubling his hiring rate of people from this program because they are exactly the kind of worker he needs. So that's the short-term kind of problem, the short-term solution. The longer term is much more complicated, but it still is very much a real thing we're attacking. So, for example, everybody knows that artificial intelligence, AI, is going to be a big thing. It already is a big thing. It's going to be even bigger. How do we get people to not only do, say, the postdoc level research on improving AI, but how do we get technicians to be part of this, knowing that they're going to be colleagues, maybe competitors to the AI systems that they're going to be working with or against? And then how do we build the AI systems to build on the knowledge that's inherent in these technicians' minds so the technician can, in helping shape the AI process, say, that's wrong. I know that's wrong from my experience. We need to go and redo the algorithm behind this thing. So that's the longer term, to make sure that, again, we have people who can not only develop the systems, but who can actually work with them, especially as those technologies and approaches change. And that's one of the real problems, is because those things keep changing, the endpoints, the things we're measuring against, are going to be changing. And so it's just a constant effort to make sure that we are finding first what are the needs, and then what are the best ways to get there, and are we in fact supplying the people who can meet those needs? Short term, relatively easy. Longer term, it's a much more opaque, moving system. And again, we'll be happy to chat some more, but that's some of what we're trying to do. Any other questions? How's our time doing? Are we almost out? Are they going to kick us out? 5 minutes? Okay. Are there other questions or comments that you might want to make? Because we've got this great team here. I'm very proud of them, and thank you for being part of it. There's a, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to ask, what is your greatest frustration with finding workers? What area is the most gnarly problem for you?
Okay. Yeah. For me personally, as director of this program I've got, for me personally, the biggest challenge, problem, headache is the fact that we don't have the equivalent of national service that's compulsory. At one point, they used to call it a draft. If you took that requirement, made it for everybody, so that everybody got a dose of required thinking about the greater good, that is not there. We don't have a draft. We don't have something to replace the draft. We don't have people who are compelled to think about the greater good. That, to me, is a huge challenge. And when you try to monetize to the point where people can say, oh, I have a monetary reason to go and pursue this thing, okay, that works for some things. It doesn't necessarily work for trying to get, say, Navy to be a first responder in an area where the power system has gone down because of a natural disaster. How do we get a microgrid out there quickly? That's a public service activity, and not everybody is going to be motivated to do that kind of public service unless they have the bucks behind it. So I think, for me personally, if there was a way to inspire everybody to think bigger and to think more societally beneficial, that's one of the messages that we try to get out there in our increasing awareness to students of all ages, is that, you could honestly be making more dollars at Google or Uber or Amazon, any of those. But again, this value proposition that we're trying to promote, there is a greater good. And that's where we're trying to get students from a very young age to recognize that, that there is value in that, and to continue on. A lot of the STEM courses out there are not necessarily easy. They're not necessarily the things that are going to be intuitive. But to make sure that, again, there's the incentive, the inspiration to keep going and persist, succeed in the long term, that's to me my personal. Other challenges?
There's some educational programs for the folks on ships. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Do you want to say? Okay, yeah, absolutely. It's a variation of remote learning, and it absolutely is something that we've been looking at, not just Navy, but of course all the services and other parts of the government where we have people abroad in places where, they might be there for a while. And so we want to make sure that they are constantly developed no matter where they are. So yeah, there is that opportunity. And that's one of the things we try to build into our programs. And it's not just people on ships, of course, but it's people on base. It's all of them, no matter where they are. That program I mentioned with community colleges, actually, I don't know if I mentioned it, but there was a program to try to get people in uniform, their dependents, their partners, educated in coding. It was a fairly small goal, but how do we get something like that going? And we were going to look at ground-based schools for that, community colleges. And then the thought was, how do we get this on ships? So the thoughts are there, and the actions are beginning to be there. It's very much an opportunity that, I think could be optimized. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question. Of course, each organization has several projects, and your organization also has several projects. You don't have to name the project name, but recently maybe one project where all of you decided that we select the information here and we improved here. Can you just share that with? Because I just want to know, compared to current technology, everybody is facing all the problems, breaching of data or not having enough security. Where your project was, I'm not talking about the cybersecurity or anything, but where you had some weakness in your project and all of you decided, or as a team decided, that we should have done this better, or we could have improved this, or we could have reached this organization to help us out. Something.
Yeah, that's it.
I can share something we're doing now. So we have cross-functional teams, and so we meet periodically, and we make sure that we talk to different stakeholders to make sure that we get their perspective. So for example, if we're going to build an IT system, we want to make sure we talk to the people who would potentially be using those systems. We want to talk to their managers who want to document workflows, and we want to optimize the way people work. So it's not just the people building the system. And then there's always, improvement doesn't stop once the project is done. It's iterative, and it continues indefinitely. So we continue to, update and make improvements as we go along. So it's a little difficult to answer your question because there's no stop period where we say, okay, we're done. It's continuously. Now, this is a good example as well. I don't actually work at ONR, but they reach out, I've reached out, and so there are no artificial barriers to allow people to talk to each other and exchange ideas. So I think that's the kind of culture at least we have, right? So,
I was just gonna say, what about like when the new fiscal year starts? I can talk as like a team when we start preparing for like the new fiscal year and when we're about to send out new documents, and we want to make sure that we have all the information from our performers and our labs and our universities to make sure that we're sending everything out correctly. I know that with the brand new team this year, we did a really good job like coming together, making sure the budget was on point, and we were prepared to send everyone their funding. But on the other end, we need all the correct information, and sometimes there's struggles there where we send them a document, please fill this out, and we don't always get all the right information, and that sets us back. And we're on a deadline as well, trying to get their funding out of the building. So there's stuff like that within the team on our end where, we're always going to get better and like converse together and learn how to like do something better for the next fiscal years and onward. That's one thing I could think of with our team.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to know because sometimes the ball is dropped, though you want to help the organization and you cannot do much because they don't have that much power in the technology or labor or the knowledge-wise, and how much you can help because you have the whole portfolio to submit, not only one Apple A or Apple B, So, yeah, because we do see that sometimes in the Maryland cybersecurity programs where buyers and sellers, they are not complying at the same time. So who has dropped the ball? The buyer dropped the ball or the seller dropped the ball, But eventually it's suffer for the consumers.
It's a team effort, but yeah, it can go both ways.
Yes, thank you.
I think it's also, for us, it's also less about who dropped the ball once it's dropped. It's how do we get it back where it needs to go so we can all keep moving forward as quickly as possible, because the demand is still going to be there. The challenges that the Navy faces are still going to be there, and they're getting harder and harder every day. So we want to make sure whenever a ball gets dropped that we can pick it up quickly and make sure that these folks get what they need so they can start to solve those problems with us, whether it's in a student capacity, in a university capacity, as an employment capacity. We want everyone to come along with us as quickly as possible.
And also, one other thing, we get a lot of inquiries from local schools, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools throughout the country, and they just find us. They find our information, and we help them as much as we can. We direct them to our local commands or where we have our partnerships and connections, and the hopes that they'll direct them to the right person, and that's something where it's all teamwork at the end of the day, not just our team literally here, but anyone that you're partnering with. That's what makes it most successful. And another thing is best practices, not only sharing contact information on who can best help address someone's problem or inquiry, but it's also sharing of information, and that's what really helps to solve solutions and to get the ball rolling, and for the betterment not only for the teams and the organizations, but for our country at the end of the day. That's what we're here for.
Okay, so our time in this room is drawing to a close. However, that does not mean the end of the conversation. Again, all the contact communications information that you want to leave with us, we'll stay in touch with you. And I invite you to stay in touch with us because we certainly can't solve these challenges by ourselves. And that certainly is not our purpose, our goal, or possibility. So yeah, if you want to keep in touch with us, please do. We're open to working with you, talking with you further in the future. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.